So, having a different show than my usual thing. I usually am like dishing drama about Dart Dawkins and company. This one's a little bit different. This is an issue that I've been kind of following for the last several months and really the last year since the pandemic silliness has been going on. It's not really silliness; it's deadly serious. But the just the amount of misinformation out there about a lot of this stuff is been really aggravating. Scientist Mel is someone who I follow on YouTube and on Twitter. I encourage you to do that as well. I invited her to come on here as a science-minded person and a science communicator to help sort some of this stuff out because I am not a scientist. I have a bachelor's degree in something that is not science. And so I'll let her introduce herself and we'll get going.
Hello, I'm Scientist Mel. I'm at my day job is chemistry professor. So I teach college chemistry. I used to teach high school. I taught high school for about 5 years. This is my third year, coming up third year teaching the college. And I got a lot of experience in that. So teaching people who don't accept evidence. I taught biology, I taught physical science, I also taught chemistry at the high school level, and teaching evolution to a bunch of farm kids. You learn a lot of things.
Yeah.
And then I do have a YouTube channel. I do science communication. And one of the reasons why I decided to do that, I felt like a moral and ethical obligation after reading the National Science Foundation numbers on science indicators and perception among the American people. And at the time, it was around 24% of America, almost one in four, thought that the sun revolved around the earth. Last I checked, it was about 27% or 28% of Americans think the sun revolves around the earth.
That number is going up ever so slightly.
It's going up.
Oh my Lord.
It's not getting better. So I feel a personal failure here. No, I don't. But there's a lot of reasons why that's happening. And we're seeing some of that with your topic, with the masks and with the current pandemic and the rampant willful ignorance people are brandishing right now, like it's a badge of honor or a Jewish Nazi star, depending on where you're at.
Yeah, and that's fraught with so many different problems. I mean, there's layers of like, no, that's just so wrong. Like that's like, that's not an equivalency. That just no, stop that. Yeah, so the point that I wanted to bring up, and thanks for your intro and everything. Everyone, I do have Mel's YouTube channel in the description. I'm probably going to put in some of the videos that I'm going to be featuring on here. But I wasn't exactly sure what their links were going to be, and I picked up a couple of them. So the first one I'm going to show us, I think this was from a couple months back. And it's Dr. Fauci being interviewed on a show called The Street. This is just a 3-minute clip. I'm going to play it straight up, and then Mel, I'll ask for your reaction, and then I'm going to go to a reaction from a very different source. So
okay.
All right, let's make sure their sound's on.
Are you sharing it with me too?
Hang on just a second. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I'm having issues with the sound. This PC is really. Ugh.
That's okay.
Add that. There we go. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And let me know if you can hear this, or if it's too low. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to adjust with this one because it's not like a YouTube video or it's an embedded player. So let's make sure it's turned up all the way. Cranked.
Dr. Fauci, I want to ask you specifically about masks. Now, I'm in South Carolina right now, and there's not a whole lot of people wearing masks. So I want to ask you specifically, can you define for people what the role of masks is, and why were we told to wait? Why were we told later in the spring to wear them when we initially were told not to?
Okay, that's a good question, and I'm glad that you asked and to give me the opportunity to clarify it. So let's start with your first question. Masks are not 100% protective. However, they certainly are better than not wearing a mask, both to prevent you, if you happen to be a person who maybe feels well but has an asymptomatic infection that you don't even know about, to prevent you from infecting someone else. But also, it can protect to a certain degree, not 100%, in protecting you from getting infected from someone who either is breathing or coughing or sneezing or singing or whatever it is in which the droplets or the aerosols go out. So masks work. The important thing is actually physical separation. So physical separation that we talk about all the time is the best way to get a virus not to get to you. But often it's impossible physically, logistically, to be physically separated to the right extent from everyone. And that's the reason why we combine physical separation with a mask, even though a mask is not 100% protective, but it does give you some protection. So you shouldn't discount that. Now, getting back to your first question, which was what about a month or so, or 2 or 3 ago, when people were saying you don't really need to wear a mask? Well, the reason for that is that we were concerned, the public health community, and many people were saying this, were concerned that it was at a time when personal protective equipment, including the N95 masks and the surgical masks, were in very short supply. And we wanted to make sure that the people, namely the healthcare workers, who were brave enough to put themselves in harm's way to take care of people who were infected with the coronavirus and the danger of them getting infected, we did not want them to be without the equipment that they needed. So there was not enthusiasm about going out and everybody buying a mask or getting a mask. We were afraid that that would deter away from the people who really needed it. Now we have masks. We know that you don't need an N95 if you're a person, ordinary person in the street. We also know that simple cloth coverings that many people have can work as well as a mask in many cases. So right now, unequivocally, the recommendation is when you're out there, particularly if you're in a situation where there's active infection, keep the distance physically and wear a mask. So although there appear to be some contradiction of you were saying this then and why you're saying this now, actually the circumstances have changed. That's the reason why.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And that's exactly how I recall it.
Yeah. And that was sort of where I knew where it was coming from, at least that was it seemed to me like I remember back in March, because the issue was, okay, well, we've got a shortage of PPE.
Mhm.
We've already got a run on this stuff. Individuals are going out and buying this stuff. So they knew that they needed to do something. So the emphasis was always going to be on, you need to stay at home if you can. You need to distance yourself from everybody.
The
Isolate
practical
yourself.
measures.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
and for epidemiologists, that was the best way. It's like, look, that we've got a potentially out of control community spread of a novel virus that can infect anyone. You need to just keep yourself separated for at least 3 weeks, right? Or 3 to 4 weeks. That's what we need to aim for.
Right.
Don't
And
get
they
out there.
couldn't even do that, man.
No, and so they had this concern, like, well, if we tell people that they can use masks instead, separating yourself is about 100% effective. Wearing a mask around somebody,
Yeah.
maybe 40% effective,
Yeah,
depending
it
on the
depends on the
circumstances.
material. I mean, they've done a lot of different different experiments to see what type of material that people have access to that's, gonna work the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was due to a lack of PPE. In New York alone, go back and look at some of what the hospitals they were wearing. They were wearing garbage bags. I mean, they were walking around with garbage bags. They were reusing masks. Which is not ideal. You don't want to reuse a mask you've been wearing all day.
Yeah.
So, but that's all they had. So yeah, we were told not to wear masks in the beginning because they were going to sell out of them. I tried to look. I was like, I might get some pull. Nowhere. There were no N95 masks anywhere to buy at all. They had all been like taken up off the shelf. There was nowhere. No company was selling them to anybody. So you couldn't get those. Even regular cloth medical masks, you couldn't get those either. There were none.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of it was I kind of understood where they were coming from, because they want us to stay distanced rather than worrying about masking up. because they needed the PPE, they need the N95 and P95 masks for medical professionals who are definitely going to be coming across people who are infected and need that protection.
Mhm.
I can maintain my protection if I stay at home and socially distance and that kind of thing, which in the
Right.
winter is harder, but it was like, this is what we need you guys to do. And then the other factor of it was like, look, you're going to run out and grab N95 and P95 masks because you have read that they're 95 plus, protection or whatever, but you
Yeah.
don't know how to wear them. So you're also going to be wasting this valuable resource, giving your,
Mhm.
thinking that you're wearing it correctly, thinking that it's fitted and it's providing you that kind of protection, and it's not.
Right.
And then I remember deeper discussions into it where they're like, well, look, the CDC has never recommended anything like surgical masks or cloth masks for flu season. It's just never been done. We don't know what the effectiveness is for this. Normally with influenza, it's like if you feel sick, stay away from people. If you see someone who's sick, stay away from them.
Mhm.
But once they started realizing with COVID, it was like, well, 40 to 45% of people are spreading this, they don't even know they're sick. Then it was like, okay, now we're in a situation where we're telling people distance and stay away if you feel bad. And then it was like, well, now we've got almost half of these people running around and they don't feel bad. So
Yeah, it's
uh,
it's crazy. But I mean, coincidentally, now since we've been wearing masks more, the incidence of flu has dropped
Yeah.
to where it's practically gone. We know masks work because they used it before during the Spanish flu. And people were encouraged to wear face coverings. I don't think there was the social distancing whole thing. They didn't get into just, I think they I don't know. I think they had curfews, but I don't know that they actively pushed social distancing just to, cover your face. And even then people were protesting wearing that. They had actual meetings late, in the evening after work meetings. They got together to talk about how they weren't going to wear these masks. And I'm going, some things never change, but
Yeah.
that's right. I mean, people don't know how to wear them anyway. And they would be wasting them. I've seen people wear the same mask, the same cloth mask or the surgical mask. They don't change them. And then they get like sores on their face. I'm like, well, you're wearing a dirty mask. That's like wearing dirty underwear all the time. You have to wash it. So,
yeah. I've had it where if I've done things with, because I have a collection of like the Chinese the KN or 95
I had
flag
those
masks.
too. Yeah, I had
And
those.
I like the way they fit, but there was one day while I was working on this recent move in, I was going to big box stores and I had this one mask and I wore it at like a Home Depot, and then I would take it off, and then I kind of hang it up and set it out in the sun or whatever, and then I'd go into a Lowe's and wear it, and I'd be in the store for 45 minutes, and even just that, I used it for 2 trips into 2 separate stores, but it's during the summer, you're sweating, and then on top of that, you've got closed off respiration. Even that was like irritating to the skin on my face. I don't know how people got away with doing like, oh yeah, I've been wearing this paper one for a week, or this cloth one I've had for the last 3 weeks, and I don't wash it. Like, and then they're like, I don't know where, I can't shake this sinus infection. Like, you think? You probably have a low-grade bacterial infection going on right now. Like,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and it's actually happened to people that I know have had this happen. So,
Yeah, you
and
gotta
it's,
wash them.
yeah. But yeah, anyway, so I'm gonna share out this other one here, and this is from Rising, show on that the Hill puts out with Crystal
Okay.
Ball and Sagar and Jetty, and the Crystal Ball, for full disclosure, is no longer on the show. I don't know why. So the show was sort of set up like he's the conservative and she's sort of the left wing person, and
Okay.
and they were supposed to do this kind of not just fair and balanced reporting, but kind of deep dives into different narratives and stuff, and like, get away from like partisan rumbling and stuff like that, and try to get to the truth. And so I'll show this one. Have you seen this, Mel?
I don't think so. So you'll get like a fresh reaction.
Yeah, this should be interesting. So make sure we share out that audio, and okay. And I love the title to it as well. Crystal and Sagar, Fauci admits live government lied about masks to preserve supplies.
They didn't lie.
Well, here we go. This is about 5 minutes. I'm going to speed this up just a little bit to about 1.25, and then so we can get through it just a little bit faster. But then let me know, flag me down, Mel, if something comes up and you want to like interject. Just let me know and I'll pause it.
Okay. Wanted to bring you some pretty stunning comments from Dr. Anthony Fauci, who basically just admitted why and how the government lied to us about the efficacy of wearing masks. Let's take a listen as he explains the real reason they told us not to do that.
What about a month or so, or 2 or 3 ago, when people were saying, you don't really need to wear a mask? Well, the reason for that is that we were concerned, the public health community, and many people were saying this, were concerned that it was at a time when personal protective equipment, including the N95 masks and the surgical masks, were in very short supply. And we wanted to make sure that the people, namely the healthcare workers, who were brave enough to put themselves in harm's way to take care of people who were infected with the coronavirus and the danger of them getting infected, we did not want them to be without the equipment that they needed.
It is
just hard
on
live television.
It is
insane.
Hard to overstate how outrageous it is.
Oh my God. What's Crystal saying? Oh my God. That's all I hear is Valley Girl right now coming out of her. And it's really hard to respect that.
And I've heard the two of them discuss different issues, and I've agreed with and disagreed with both of them on different things. But this was sort of the first one that I saw where it was like, this seems like they're just trying to stir the pot.
Yeah, that's not what he said at all. The government didn't lie. And as I recall, they were asking people not to buy them for that reason.
Yeah,
they were very forthright.
Yeah. And even people that were like, you know what, you can do things. Because the word was getting around like, well, look, if you want to wear a mask or something like that, you could make these cloth masks. Companies started doing it before they even. And that was when it slowly turned around. And the official word was like, you know what, for average people, and because we have this asymptomatic spread going on, if you do have to go out, if you are in a situation where you've got to like take care of a loved one or see them or something like that, you can't totally socially distance, at least wear these cloth masks. Maybe that's going to be a good thing. We don't have any hard numbers on it. This isn't something the CDC's recommended before, but maybe go ahead and do that. But please try to keep your distance. That's what I remember the narrative being in April and May.
What it was.
And these guys are talking about like, well, they didn't have their shit together from day one. No, they didn't. They didn't even know that the COVID virus was spreading asymptomatically in March. It wasn't until later on they started realizing this, I think.
Well, to be fair, Trump was warned about it the fall, like in the fall prior to the emergence of the virus. And he had fired the pandemic response team just a few months before it started hitting.
Yeah.
And you're going, okay. And then there's memos and notes that have come out saying that he wanted people to get infected because he completely did not understand herd immunity. And he just disregarded it. He didn't care. So.
Yeah. And that was obvious too, because then it's, well, this is going to be like flu. It's just going to go away. Sun comes out, the snow thaws, we'll all be fine. I kind of wonder with that attitude. He's like, well, if I'm in Florida and the sun's shining, I'm not going to get sick down there. And it's like,
I mean, you can get the flu year round. That's what's hilarious to me.
Yeah. He just seems like, well, once the sun is shining and the temperature's up to a certain degree, it just kills off all the virus. Like, no.
Oh my God.
It kills off some viruses, but it takes time. And the reason that they live in you is so that they can avoid direct exposure to the sun.
I mean, yeah, I don't know how many shows I did talking about the crap he said. I don't even know.
It was just buckets of things to debunk. I'm going to play a little bit more of this because their little back and forth is kind of funny.
Okay.
Because they didn't play the whole thing. They didn't show like it's like 3 minutes long. He gives a 3-minute explanation, tries to provide some context. These two played 25 seconds, 30 seconds of it, and they're just oh no.
He lied.
No. The Surgeon General and the U.S. government were saying, don't wear a mask, not because we need these critical supplies for our frontline healthcare workers, which would have been that. Like, yes, tell us that. People would have listened. No, there was a whole elaborate rationales and many articles written about how masks didn't really work. So don't buy masks, don't wear masks. In fact, they may make things worse. But also, oh, by the way, our healthcare professionals are definitely going to be wearing them.
Well, who is writing those? That's the question. Who are
Right.
you reading and listening to?
And this is what's so meta about this, because it's like your media narrative now is based on you reflecting on media narratives you embraced back then. And she's going to make the point here that, like, well, wait a minute. If they're writing these articles saying masks aren't that effective, then why are those masks necessary for medical providers? If you told people not to buy that stuff, they would have listened. They were told, and they bought them anyway. How many medical supply rings did they break up in the spring of 2020 of people who went out and bought? They stockpiled sanitizer and were selling 1-ounce bottles for $25 on eBay. I mean, people were profiteering from the pandemic left and right.
There was one guy, I can't remember. I don't remember which state he was in. They found his storage unit where he had bought so much hand sanitizer. They arrested him and he faced charges. And then they took all of his hand sanitizer and donated it to medical organizations. So, you know, you can't do that. They were looking at it as like a fraud thing because he was going to make a quick buck.
Yeah, the fact that they're kind of like, I mean, when I heard that, when I saw this video, this was from what? This one was from June 18th. And when I saw it, I was like, what the hell are they talking about? Do they not remember the people that were hoarding this stuff? That was why the government line was like, don't hoard PPE. You guys are buying respirators. You need to allow you need to make, you know, that they're in short supply because China's been shut down for a while and China makes most of them. They're not making them right now. Yeah, this was so frustrating to hear this.
Yeah.
Let me play a little bit more here.
Made sense. You're like, if they don't work, then why does it matter for them to have them? It never made sense. And then it comes out, he just admits they were blatantly lying to us.
They lied to us to keep supply. And you know what? If they had just been honest with Americans and said,
they were,
please don't buy a mask right now. We need
they said
all the professional masks for professionals. Make one out of a towel that you have laying around, an old towel.
They said use a bandana. You remember? They had a whole thing on how to fold it up and tie it around your face.
And they eventually did get into this later on, within the next month, they were talking about like, try to use a cloth mask if you want some kind of protection, or you want to protect others from you if you think you're infected or you think you may be asymptomatic. Like all of this stuff was said. Like it's like, well, you know, the narratives I read back then, they were saying that just masks don't work. Period. I'm like, I looked for articles that said this. I cannot find them. I tried dating them and I tried going back. I'm like, where would Sager and Crystal have found these articles that said that masks?
I think they're thinking of memes on Facebook.
They might be.
Probably what they're thinking of, because that's where I see a lot of that is memes on Facebook.
Yeah, like when you say people are saying, like, you mean Twitter and Facebook?
All right. I'll cut it up. We'll show you how to do it. Fine. Right. Who would not have done that? I would have done it. So would have millions of other Americans.
Right.
Instead,
and millions of Americans did do that, and a lot of others didn't do that. Even though they were told to do that, they reacted against that too.
And then they had their nose hanging out the top. Like, why don't you walk around with your genitals hanging out of your pants? You know?
I only do that in the privacy of my own home. So
it's the same thing. It's like cover up. There are air holes there.
When I show up at a grocery store and they don't allow me to enter pantsless, I leave the premises, come back with an AR-15, and then assert my constitutional rights to shop pantsless.
That's right. Try this.
It's America, damn it.
I have a right to go and get groceries without my pants on.
It's like, sir, we need you to gird your loins, sir.
I'm being oppressed.
How dare you? Are you body shaming me?
You're body shaming me. This is natural. This is all natural.
This is not what the founding fathers wanted. Sam Adams was a nudist.
People died. And now we're actually learning. Out of all of the things, remember Fauci at the time was like, wash your hands, wash my hands 30 times a day. Not a lot of efficacy to washing your hands. Hand sanitizer. Number one most important thing, wearing a mask.
What?
Yes, you wash your hands.
The whole, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, but because I got this narrative from them. I remember people people all over the place were doing this. Bill Nye did this. I think Alton Brown even did this is how NASA and the CDC tell you this is how you should wash your hands. And Alton Brown, if you're fans of any of his early cooking videos, he hates working with poultry. He basically treats it like a biohazard, which you should.
Yeah, it pretty much is.
And he's like, this is how you should wash your hands before and after dealing with these toxic birds, or dealing with, COVID. Goes through the whole technique of it, There were people coming out, and I don't know if they've done studies on this, but people just adopting some of those longer hand washing rituals noticed a sharp decrease during cold and flu season.
Yes.
Of other infections of things like rhinovirus and stuff like that. So,
I mean, there was even a website, and I used it for a little bit. I'm trying to think what the name of it was. You can put in your favorite song, and it has like the pictures of what to do with washing your hands with the lyrics. So I, of course, picked Run DMC Tricky. The speech is my recital. I think it's very vital to rock around. That's right all time. So you sing Tricky, you rap Tricky while you're washing your hands. And when you get to the chorus, it's tricky to rock. Once you get to that, you're done. Yeah. So,
nice.
But you could do that. Washing your hands is really important. I don't know why these people would say that, because to be quite honest, I worked in a preschool for a little while. I've actually taught every age of human, pretty much, preschool. And I've taught high school. I could legally teach like middle school, and now I'm teaching adults. So it's like people are disgusting. And children are disgusting. I taught preschool, I think it was like 2 years or something, like 1.5-year-olds, like babies, but they were smart when they left my class, I tell you. But you get sick. You get sick because they carry so much stuff and their hands are dirty. They put stuff in their mouths. And the best way to like knock it out was disinfecting everything and washing their hands all the time. But I would get sick. I got so sick once I lost my voice from a bunch of kids. But you have to wash your hands. We would have to sanitize everything. We had a percentage of bleach water, percentage solution that we had to do. And we had to change it every day, because after a while bleach breaks down and becomes a salt, and it's completely useless. But you have to. I don't understand why they would say.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, because James Henry, is this Fox? No, this is actually Rising. This was a show that Hill.tv puts out, the Hill magazine, newspaper, whatever. And so they put this show together, and it's been going for a while. It has a decent like YouTube social media presence. And to answer, let's see, what is this? It is in the air, inside of it. Washing hands is good for cleanliness, but not stopping things in the air. See their point. Yeah, no, that's not really the point he's making here. He seems to be suggesting that hand washing was less effective than what the government was saying. If you have, one of the things that was really at issue here was that people thought that the government was telling them, if you just do this, you will be fine. The government was almost never saying that. Trump may have said that.
Because Trump is stupid.
Trump's an idiot. But people, if you were listening to people out of the CDC, they're like, no, things are not going to be fine. This is a novel virus, meaning that everyone can potentially get it. And the more people that get it, the riskier it's going to be, the more out of control it will get, the more likely it will mutate into other strains that might be harder to control, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to stop that chain reaction. And things like, and really the only thing that you can do is distance. And then there were like masks, but social distancing and hygiene. Make sure that washing your hands is predominantly to keep you from infecting yourself.
Exactly, because we try not touching your face all day. It's hard. Really hard.
Yeah. I remember people starting to develop like panic disorders because they were thinking like, this is permanent. I can never itch my nose again. And it's like, no, that's not exactly how far you need to go. But
and I have like the psychological thing. So when I go into a lab and I got to wear my goggles or whatever, my safety goggles, I walk in, my nose immediately starts itching. Immediately, I'm like, my nose didn't itch at all today until I walked into this lab, and now I got a thing on my face and chemicals on my hands. I can't scratch my nose.
Yep. Yeah, you immediately become conscious of it. It's like, yeah, you're like, hey, you know what you should do? Scratch your nose. Get infected.
Scratch your nose right now. I mean, so
Crack yourself up.
I got to the point I just washed my hands all the time. I used hand sanitizer only when soap and water wasn't available.
Yeah.
And so I kept some in my car. I sometimes, if I felt like I was in a particularly disgusting area, I would use hand sanitizer on my face. But
Whoa.
I would just around my orifices.
At least you get that thick whiff of ethanol too. Like, whoa, a little bit of a head buzz.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
I'm boofing with Purell. Don't please. Yeah. Little disclosure. Do not boof with hand sanitizer. Please don't do that.
yeah, don't do. And I thought it was pretty interesting when the hand sanitizer shortage started. And then a lot of distilleries were making the correct percentage of ethanol that you would need in order to make your own. I actually made my own until they like stocked up more on the hand sanitizer. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the most, I'm trying to find one that doesn't turn into like little white powdery flakes, because I do a sort of abbreviated hand washing, like the way I wash my hands with soap. I do that with hand sanitizer. I use enough to really kind of get a decent scrub and get under the fingertips and everything. And I find that after about 25 seconds of that, some of those things, they've got like either moisturizers are in there. I get these little rubbery, pills that have formed up, and I'm like, oh, this is a mess.
See, as soon as I get anywhere where I can have like a sink and soap, I just go ahead and wash my hands so I don't get that too. So
yeah, and I don't like the layer that it leaves, because the worst thing is having like a thick layer of hand sanitizer on and then grabbing, on a hot, humid day, an ice cold bottle of water and trying not. Yeah, it just shoots out of your hand like a wet bar of soap. Like,
oh, good times.
Yeah, first world problems with apocalyptic pandemic. But yeah, let's see if these guys rewrite any of the past year and a half's worth of history here.
Oh God, they've been doing that. Yeah.
Mask is what they say in crowded places, and that the method of transmission, it's not even off surfaces. It's if you're in an enclosed area where people are talking loudly and where there's not a lot of air circulation, which is highly populated. And the number one way that you can
not even highly populated, if it's just two people. It's a good idea. They were recommending if you're going to be in an enclosed environment and there's only a few people in there, put your mask on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is to wear a mask whenever you're in such an environment. And so it's just like all of a sudden we're just like all wearing masks now. I can't even get service at a restaurant if I don't have my mask on. A couple months ago, people were just walking around willy-nilly. How many people died because of that? I just think this is the greatest public health
scandal. A lot of people. A lot of people died, but not exclusively because of the mask thing. A lot of people died because people didn't take it seriously, and our great and wonderful leader was pushing this idea that it wasn't really real, and that it wasn't a big deal, and that you could just walk out in sunshine and be okay. Maybe we should get flashlights and shove them up our butt. Light kills it. Let's inject bleach into ourselves. I mean, he was.
Oh, those were jokes, don't you know? Those were jokes.
It's like when Fox News gets sued and they say if anybody takes this seriously, it's their fault.
It's like McDonald's with food. They're like, well, we never wanted you to. We don't want you to consider what we're selling you food. It's entertainment. Like, I thought I was buying. This actually counted as my lunch. That's a meal. But you actually were selling me fun taste time, like all of this stuff is bad for you. And they actually use that they're like, we don't consider our customers diners, we consider them users.
And we're the pushers because their food is highly addictive from the different chemicals they use.
Yeah, and they got ridiculed for this. I'm like, well, from a legal standpoint, I guess this might hold up a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, don't go, your little thing like, oh, I can go get I can get a burger, 100% real beef. Like they started having to tell people that it's made out of real beef. Like, what? Wait, you mean just now it is? Like I've been eating this stuff since I was a kid from time to time. Like, fuck you.
Get you a Happy Meal, man, with them fries that, will probably still be lasting 2,000 years from now when they find it in the bottom of a car at an excavation site.
I should ask you about this. It's totally tangential, but I can't remember what it was, but I was reading one of Michael Pollan's books, and he was talking about them being capable of identifying the amount of corn in the diet of remains that they found at Aztec dig sites. And there's a certain level that they find either in the bones or something that corn kind of leaves behind a trace in the animals that eat it. And so they did these tests, and they're like, yeah, I mean, you check Aztec remains, you can see that there's actually conclusive scientific physical evidence that they ate a lot of corn. And like your average American has something like 2 to 3 times that level. like, yeah, we eat a lot of corn because it's in everything. So yeah, I can't remember what that marker is called, but it's really interesting. It just sort of gets embedded in you. It's not dangerous. It's just
right.
It's just there. It's like, yeah.
I mean, you are what you eat, I guess.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It really is. And
so it really is the biggest public health scandal. Like, I would agree with them that this would be the biggest public health scandal if what they were saying was true in the way that they're saying it.
But that's not how it went down. We had Dr. Fauci did lots of outreach. He was on so many different shows, even YouTube channels. He was trying to get the correct information out there. And Trump would just discredit him in another White House press conference or whatever. He was constantly just backtracking and saying it wasn't a big deal. So he's pushing like this narrative that contradicts everything the CDC said and Dr. Fauci and the NIH. And it's when you've got that going on, you have this person that you idolized on a TV show who's now, he's like your soap opera star who made it to president. And you're like, okay, well, I voted for this guy. Look at him. He's the American dream. He does exactly what I think. And now he's telling me I need to do these things. Well, look at him. He's successful. I believe what he says. These scientists, they think they're better than everybody else. They think they know so much. They think they're so smart with their stupid degrees. I mean, and I think that's kind of what happens. He started that. He continued to push the us versus them type of mentality. And so the people who actually genuinely care about others, who are trying to save people's lives, are going, I don't know what to do. And all we can do is spend more money on education. There are so many CDC videos out right now of people of all kinds of different backgrounds talking about how the vaccine helps them. Yeah. Because there's such a huge resistance to getting this vaccine because of the previous administration pushing the narrative that it's not real.
Well, how many people were saying that? And they're like, well, because I heard this from people that they weren't friends of mine, but they were people that I was acquainted with one way or the other. And they're like, I just don't understand how anyone can trust a vaccine that's so new. And I was like, we've been researching SARS and MERS for decades now. The particular vaccine research that we're looking at is about 10 years old, or was 10 years old back when they kind of like, peeled the cover back off. I'm like, okay, all right, we get to get back to this, because the funding for stuff like that is always so hit and miss.
Well, I do kind of understand the concerns people have, because normally before they started talking about the mRNA technology, normally it takes a couple of years to get a vaccine out. Yeah. And that's largely due to the fact that you have to have a deactivated version of the virus in order to make your vaccine. With this particular tech, there's no deactivated virus. So you don't have to grow them. You don't have to culture them. You don't have to deactivate them. Then you don't have to inject them into these eggs. So you have taken out an entire step that would take about a year in order to make enough. You've taken that step out completely. Yeah. And with the technology of the messenger RNA vaccine, there is no virus parts in it. It's just that little teeny tiny little recipe on how to make that one receptor that the virus has, which allows it to enter every single cell in your body. So your own cells, because genetic code is universal, that messenger RNA, which has a very short half-life, it falls apart usually right after it's read by your ribosomes, makes that little protein, releases it out of the cell, and then your immune system goes, that's not one of us. What the heck is that protein? Then they start to make antibodies, and those antibodies will fit on that little receptor of the virus of anytime it enters into you, then it'll recognize it and it gums it up to keep it from entering into your cells. That's why this virus is so bad. It can enter just about every cell in your body. This is why we're seeing lots of different organ failure. But this vaccine, it doesn't change your DNA, but people hear genetic material and they think, oh, this is going to change my DNA.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a messenger RNA. It falls apart right after it's read. That's it.
Yep. So. Thanks. So no, you're not going to grow horns or wait. So you're saying I'm not going to get Wolverine claws? I got 2 shots for nothing. Damn it.
Sorry.
Damn it. I mean, the 5G chip, it was worked great. My reception works, although it is messing up my laptop. I blame it for messing up my laptop's wireless adapter.
I need to see if my arm is like magnetic.
Yeah, just attach a spoon to it. Click.
Yeah. I'll lick it first and it works every time.
Maybe that's what happened. I laid down too close to my phone that one time, and the magnet started throwing things off. I know Bluetooth doesn't work as well because the Bluetooth wants to connect to the 5G in my head. So, anyway, let's see if they got any more nuggets in here, and then I'll wrap this thing up.
Okay.
How many people are still not wearing masks because of that early indication that they didn't work? And so that was part of what fed this whole like culture war, wear a mask, not wear a mask thing. If everyone had been honest and upfront and on the same page, then you may have more compliance from people at this point when we do know that this is actually something that's really important, that really helps stop the spread. And as we're talking about this, we are seeing a spike in a lot of states. 10 states saw a record number of new COVID cases this week. Florida in particular is looking like a potential new epicenter. 23 states right now are seeing an upward trend in new coronavirus cases. And look, states are reopening, and this is partly anticipated. We don't know yet what the fallout from Memorial Day and then the protest is ultimately going to be. But part of the problem, too, is that people have been lied to, and they got that information.
I think we could predict that.
I mean, predicting that Florida and the Sun Belt states are going to be are going to be reckless with public health. Like, we know that they're going to do that. They've been demonstrating it for the entire pandemic.
I mean, you can always expect a virus to get worse if you increase its opportunity to spread to other people.
And the fact that some of these public health officials in states like that, or even in other countries, are basically like, you know what? We can't deal with the grousing and the complaints and the protests. So we're just going to like tell people that they need to accept the new normal. And it's like, okay, that's stupid. Also, what you're trying to do is you're basically saying that you're willing to accept that that SARS-CoV-2 and its variants it's just going to be an endemic. Like, we have actually kind of collectively decided that we've accepted the fact that this is going to be an endemic thing where we're going to be developing vaccines for possibly new strains for the next several years. As if and like, well, it's just going to be like the flu, and it's like, yeah, exactly. And the reason that we haven't been able to completely fuck up the flu is because people are stupid. So, like, we could and we've demonstrated that we gave the flu an ass kicking by wearing masks, and 25 to 30% of the population wasn't wearing masks. And we still put a hurting on it, right? Like, that's opportunities right there for the flu to change and mutate and for new strains to form. That didn't have that this last year. But now, this notion that like, well, we didn't need to listen to the scientists before. Sure, there's this Delta variant out there, and maybe it's a little bit more dangerous, and we still don't know what the long term. Like, we don't even know, like, given what you said, this particular virus can get in and affect so many different cells. Like, long term, is this going to increase the risk of certain cancers in people?
Well, I mean, when you look at the COVID-19 with the long haulers, there are people who still are having a hard time fully recovering from that, and we don't know 100% what that's going to look like. My sister is I think she's still a long hauler. She still has the neurological stuff. But she also has an autoimmune disease. My brother-in-law got sick. She got sick. My niece got sick. And ironically, my sister actually, she does have OCD, and she's super hyper about hand sanitizing everything. And so even with that, she still managed to get the virus from her husband, who actually works at a grocery chain and part of their distribution. And so he was coming in contact with different people, and it can still happen. Even if you've already been sick, you should still get the vaccine, because oftentimes your immune system will develop a stronger response to the vaccine than just being exposed to the infection. And with the Delta variant, there are some people with breakthrough infections, but it's not sending them to the hospital. 97% of the people who are in the hospital right now from the Delta variant are unvaccinated. And 99% of the current COVID-19 deaths are people who have not been vaccinated. So at 100%, the vaccine will 100% reduce your risk of developing lethal symptoms. And I think it's 98 to 99% effective in stopping infection altogether.
Yeah.
So it's like, but people don't want to do that because somehow this reduces their liberties, or they want to be able to make a choice. But I also find it interesting that these same people are anti-abortion. I'm like, you're almost there, Karen. You're almost there. And then Candace Owens is like, well, if they're just handing out this vaccine for free, why don't they do that with insulin? I'm like, you're almost there, Candace. You're almost there.
Yeah.
Just one step further.
Yeah. Like, yeah, about that.
You're almost there. Just take the leap.
Yeah. I think that, she's like, oh, I'm going to back away from that ledge. Like, yeah, you better, Candace. I think your worldview's about to fall apart. No, there was something that I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong about the epidemiology on this, but I was in a restaurant. It was the first time that I'd went in and dined in a restaurant in over a year. I've been vaccinated. The town that I've moved to has a really high vaccination rate. I'm kind of in a college town. And it's the summertime, so everything is pretty slow. So lunchtime, I go to this place, and I'm enjoying their food. It's still a little subdued. People are still a little bit nervous, but I can overhear this conversation happening at another table, and it's two people talking, and one of them is shaming people for using personal shoppers during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of thought about it, and I was like, well, and the reasons that this person had were, well, here's the thing. You're telling somebody who's probably like working poor or impoverished, which I thought was an interesting, like, wait, you're assuming that this is this person's only job? Like, that this isn't like a side, because I know people that do this kind of stuff as a side hustle because they enjoy it. But he's like, well, you got somebody who's basically working poor, and you're sending them in to risk getting infected rather than doing that yourself when you're perfectly healthy. And I'm like, well, that's kind of dumb. I seem to recall that, like, if I use a personal shopper, that person is going in to shop for me and probably on average 6 to 10 other people that day.
Exactly.
And if some of those people that shopper is shopping for don't have the ability to stay at home or go to the store themselves, they have kids that they would have to take in tow. So the risk of cross-contamination and spread, you got one person representing a minimum of 6 people, possibly more if you factor in kids.
Right.
That's a lot of reduction in exposure.
That's exactly true. I mean, I used personal shoppers. I used Instacart because I knew also that there might be people, who were laid off, maybe. Maybe they're dealing with unemployment, maybe. And I would always tip high for them because I knew what their risk was.
Yeah, I did too.
I would tip high, and I knew, and I thanked them every time. And so by me not going, I'm reducing the potential of exposure and possibly spreading something as well. And that one person, they're representing about 6 or 7, possibly 8 different people. And they're knocking it all out at one time, and they're making a little bit of money. They're wearing masks. They know what they need to do to protect themselves as well. So, you know, I get kind of like, well, you shouldn't be sending people out to do this. Well, there were going to be people going out anyway. And so if I can have somebody else go in my stead, who's also going instead of all of these other people, and I pay them like a good tip, I would easily pay at least $15 an hour. If it was going to take them 2 hours, they're going to get 25 to $30 from me.
Yeah.
You know, at least that.
And for me, it was like, oh, you know, I mean, I could do that. And I almost wanted to correct these people, but that's, I probably lost some social cues. So I was like, hang on a second. I'm like, wait, they're not on the internet. This is not someone wrong on the internet. This is actually real life. Don't do that. But I was like, no, I understand that the like, hey, why don't you go in there and do that yourself? And it was like, but the issue I think would have been like, it would have been decent public policy had they subsidized an army of trained personal shoppers to go and get groceries for the majority of people, so that only the people in the stores, instead of trying to set up one lane or, you know, one-way lanes, or try to do like, oh, we'll cap them, and we'll police them if they don't wear masks, or we'll police them if they've got their nose hanging out over their mask or anything. Like, you've got trained personal shoppers going in, that this is part of their job, right? Is to sanitize, wear their masks, keep their distance, go in and buy their stuff for other people, and then get out and deliver it. Like, that would be something interesting to subsidize, you know, like we'll do like a federal work program, like, your job is, you're a pandemic shopper, you know, and they train them to do that. So, and that's it, just to do that, just to reduce the number of bodies in stores spreading this stuff. So, I
mean, and when I didn't do the shopping thing, like with the separate shopper, I would do the grocery pickup. And I would open up the back of my truck. I'd be like, you can put it back there. Do you want anything up front? Nope. Put it in the back. Just put it all back there. Then I'd come home. I would sanitize my groceries. And they would say, well, you know, maybe that's going a bit far. Well, in my view, if I had somebody as they were putting stuff away, sneeze on it, some of the people who are handling my groceries have their nose hanging out, I just felt better wiping down my own groceries. Even I would wash my produce with a little bit of dish soap, because you only need just a little bit of soap to bust those little lipid bubbles that the viruses are. Yeah. So, you know, I still, you can reduce your risk by doing all of that. And I did for almost 2 years. Once I got vaccinated, I'm like, you know what? I don't have to wipe down my groceries anymore. This is going to be nice.
That was the first thing that went for me. Yeah, because I continued because I mean, I would usually get small orders, so it wasn't really a big deal for me to do that. But yeah, as soon as 2-3 weeks away from my second Pfizer shot, I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. Although every once in a while, depending on what store I've been to and what items I've purchased, I'll look at them after I've taken them out of their bags and stuff, and like, yeah, I'm wiping these down.
I want to wipe those down. Oh goodness.
It's like, that's a really greasy thumbprint. Like, that's getting cleaned off. That's gross. Like, and that's not my thumb. So.
Yeah, people are pretty gross. I'm probably gonna have to start. I did stop wearing a mask, but I'm probably gonna have to start wearing one again, because people out here are just not getting vaccinated, and they're acting like everything's fine. And so I don't know. I'll probably go back to wearing a mask again around other people, because of trying to be a good example. But it's just
regionally. Are you in the southeast or southwest?
Not really southeast, south middle.
South middle. Okay, gotcha.
South middle, right? Yeah. Oh God, it's just, they're just terrible out here. They still think it's not real or not so bad. But the hospitals are filling with people who are begging for the vaccine now, and doctors are telling them it's too late. I can't give that to you. There was an article, you should check it out, about a doctor in Alabama who has told so many patients, so like, I want the vaccine now, I can get it. And she's like, no, I'm sorry, it's too late, right before she intubates them and they die. So people are begging for the virus while they're laying in hospital bed. Not the virus, but the vaccine while they're laying in hospital beds dying.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
It's horribly sad.
That's horribly sad. Yeah, that's like, look, it was easy for you to be proud and obstinate when you were healthy, and now it's gone too far. And it's like, okay, well, now I realize that it's like, look,
But
I don't understand the disconnect. It's like how many, even if you think that it's being exaggerated, how many people do you have to hear about dying from this crap to not take those basic precautions?
it didn't work before when there were pastors who would say, "Oh, it's not real. It's not real. It's not real. We're going to keep having church." And then, you have a massive outbreak at one of these churches and half the congregation dies. Then the pastor's in the hospital going, "I was wrong. I was wrong." And you hear these stories. We've been hearing them for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
They're still not listening. They're not listening. And that's one of the things as a science communicator, taking it full circle, as a science communicator, the way that I have had to deal with teaching people who don't accept evidence is to make it personal for them.
Yeah.
Like with climate change. Do you want your food to be extremely expensive? Do you enjoy getting these items? How much is your electricity bill? Double that.
Right.
You think it's hot now? Wait and see.
Or imagine that every time it rains in your area, you have to cancel your plans.
Yes, you have to cancel your plans. You don't get to go on vacation anymore.
Because now it's not a question of like, oh, it rained out a picnic. It's like, no, there's actually dangerous flooding going on, and now it's treacherous for you to drive.
Yeah, you can't even leave your house.
Yeah, it's like, and that I've noticed that here where I live, and I live in an area where I'm in the northern Midwest, but the rains that we've been getting this summer are bizarre. They're like things that I would have expected to see.
Yeah.
There was one yesterday that happened where the wind was swirling. I'm not in a tornado prone area, but we had a tan sky and rain that was coming from every direction all at once, and it did that for 6 minutes, broke up, and downpoured straight down torrentially, stopped, and then the sun came out, and then it was like 90% humidity, 90 degrees. It was just really weird. I had another one happen earlier in the week. It came out of nowhere. Flooding, hydroplaning, lasted for 20 minutes, and then it stopped, and just enough to cause some accidents and a lot of visibility problems. It's been like that. And I remember being younger, we would get prolonged periods of heat. We'd get a heat wave, and we'd get thunderstorms with that kind of energy. And now it's like we'll get a day or two of heat and then get these storms with like double that energy, double that intensity. And it's just that these are really strange. We'll go from a drought to flooding. So yeah, it's definitely observable.
And that's been the only way for me to be able to get through to people. And also trying to like make it personal, make it relevant to their lives. You can only give them so many examples about people dying in the hospital and saying, do you really want this for yourself? They don't think that's them. I don't know what their view. I think they tend to romanticize what death is. And they think, oh, well, that's those people. That's not me. My death will be something glorious, and then there'll be a party. I mean, so people tend to not actually think about what the death is like so much as, well, I'll die peacefully in my bed with my children around me. And it just, they don't actually see the reality of it, because
dying alone, isolated with a tube in your lungs.
That's scary to think about. And so you get that, oh, that makes me feel bad. I don't want to think about that. That makes me feel bad. And so you get that ostrich bias where you put your head in the ground because the news is scary. That's a real thing too. So making it personal, but also understanding people don't like bad news. They don't like to hear about that. They don't want to think about that. So having to navigate that and saying, look, I want you to live COVID free. I want you to have a happy, healthy life. And this is the best way to do it right now. May not be perfect, but do you want to live to see your grandkids, or do you want to die alone in a bed?
With a tube in your lungs. And you're doped up on whatever it is they give you to keep you from having panic attacks because you got the tube in your lungs. Yeah, let me play a little bit more of this, then I'll knock it off. Unless you're not interested, I can.
Oh no, it's cool. We can do that.
Is going to have a massive impact.
Lied to twice now. First on the mask, then on the protest. Not anybody, just people just whitewashing, saying no. Protests are fine. It's all good. But you also, the fact that you had to cancel your wedding and all that still stands.
So we were. I forgot he slipped that in there. We were lied to about the mask. We were lied to about the protest. I remember they'd brought this up because the government didn't. They could have done this, and I believe the CDC has the authority to do this. When those protests kicked up after George Floyd last summer, the idea was that I remember hearing this from some people. Well, can't the government do something to stop this? Like, absolutely, but what they're going to end up invoking is a kind of authority you, frankly, are not willing to accept. I mean, they wanted well, I don't understand why the government's not telling these people they can't protest. And it's like, well, remember the protests you guys were having maskless with AR-15s hanging off your chests at state capitals, yelling at cops because you wanted to be able to get a haircut. You wanted to be able to
go to Applebee's.
You want to go to Applebee's. Yeah. You want to, why is my local bar closed down? I should be able to hang out with all these, you remember that the government was unwilling to stymie that too. A lot of local ones were, because it was an exercise of free speech. The best thing that they could do after that kind of reaction to things, these nationwide protests, was to then kind of study the fact that since they were happening in the summer and they were mostly occurring outside, the rate of spread was pretty low.
It's interesting. There was one particular massive protest that was super right wing. Nobody was wearing any masks. I'm trying to think. I think it was either in Arizona. I can't remember which one. Nobody was wearing any masks, and it became a super spreader event. And they were able to track, once those people left that protest, there were spikes in multiple states. But then they've actually done a study on the Black Lives Matter protests versus the right-wing protests. At the Black Lives Matter protests, people were socially distanced. They were wearing masks. There were hand sanitizer stations. There's no increase of outbreak from those protests, but there were from the ones with people screaming without masks, yelling that they want a haircut and to get into Applebee's.
It's just the strangest thing. The biggest thing that I missed from my particular area was that I was not able to get my favorite type of Lebanese food. That was I didn't, I'm like, oh man, I'm not gonna have shawarma once a month. Now it's it was okay, every 6 months I can go and get this is takeout. But and for anybody that doesn't know what shawarma is, it's delicious if done right.
They talk about it in the Avengers film, and then they go get shawarma in one of the Easter eggs.
That actually kicked up the searches for shawarma, I think, in the LA area. People are like, what the hell is shawarma? I want to know. And then they're like, oh, okay, apparently they're not from this part of the Midwest, where we have a large population of people from the Middle East, and shawarma is everywhere. So, yeah.
Man.
But unfortunately, it's not always the same thing. It's basically, for Canadians, it's doner.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but doner can be that kind of greasy, Euro meat too.
I've had that in poutine. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Some decent poutine.
But yeah, the best stuff, the best shawarma is just stacks of chicken thighs, marinated heavily spiced. It just sits on a big rotating thing. It's just,
and then they slice it off, and yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And it's really just it's kind of the same as tacos al pastor. You can do the same al pastor, doner. There, it's all a rotisserie. But there's something about the seasonings that Lebanese and Jordanian places use. It's great. Anyway, I'm getting hungry. That's why I did that. So yeah. So anyway, I'll wrap it up here, since then I'm getting into their other misinterpretation is that they were lied to about the protests as well.
Oh God.
And this bothers me, because the right-wing ones that happen, the one that you mentioned, that actually they tracked it and there were super spreader stuff. And then some of the left-wing ones where I remember watching those and thinking look, I can side with what some of these people are protesting on, but given that it's a pandemic, I certainly wouldn't be out there. And I knew people that joined local protests and stuff on it. And I was like, I get it, but I just, at this stage in the pandemic, I don't think that's all that responsible. Because if you have to mix it up with police, or you mix it up with counter protesters, that's a lot of chaos to try to control. And you don't want to spread stuff. And it's like, I just don't think that's a good idea. But then finding out later on, it was like, well, since most of these people were masked and most of them were outdoors, and when they weren't maskless, they tended to keep, they were keeping their distance. It seemed it wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be. They thought every one of them was going to be a super spreader, but that didn't turn out to be a thing. But yeah, like saying that the government was lying about that somehow, it's like, okay, these guys would have been on here doing the show if the government had just granted some overarching control to the CDC, where the CDC gets full, federal authority to shut assemblies down.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they could have just had the National Guard activated in just about every state and instituted, martial law and make people stay at home and say, okay, well, we're going to drop off food at your doors. We're going to ration everything. You'll stay home. I mean, that could have happened, guys.
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't have this virus right now, probably.
Yeah, but we would have these people grousing after the fact, like, I bet there wasn't even a virus to begin with. You know what? I bet it was real. It was a cover-up. What they were actually doing was like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll end this, but there was one last question I was going to ask you about, and that was like your take on the Wuhan and anyone else. If I think we got a little bit more time. If anybody's got questions for Mel, post them in the chat. Just post them to. Well, I think she's probably in there. You should, at Scientist Mel. It'll probably work. Go ahead and post those in there. We'll flag them on here. But the Wuhan lab question that was asked to Dr. Fauci.
Oh gosh,
the way he answered it, and then China's reaction to it, which I thought was interesting.
Are we talking about the gain of function thing?
It was.
Which question?
It was the one where a reporter asked him if he believed that SARS-CoV-2, he's like convinced SARS-CoV-2 originated in the wild, or could it have come from a lab? Which I think is kind of that part of the question I think is a little bit vague and kind of potentially loaded. And he's like, no, I'm not completely convinced that it couldn't have emerged out of some lab exposure. And he's like, there's investigations going on and questions being asked about that. But his personal feeling was that it's probably a natural mutation.
Okay. Was that an old question that he was asked from a while ago?
When was he asked? Because there was a, let me see if I can find it.
Because we have papers now that have been published to show that they are very different molecularly and genetically. So the ones that were being tested on in the Wuhan lab, what's going on in the news right now is Rand Paul, that jerk. I can't stand him. They're trying to push the narrative that the virus came out of the Wuhan lab, and that NIH, which is where Dr. Fauci's in charge, funded research that could have caused this virus in the lab to be more lethal to humans and more transmissible. But the type of research that they were doing did not involve altering viruses at all. And the type of research now in 2014, that's when they stopped, when our government stopped funding any kind of research to try to see what the next evolutionary path would be for like a zoonotic disease, to see, okay, well, if this virus were to evolve, what kind of stuff would it evolve into? And that's where they would try to see if they could make it more transmissible or not. But that type of funding was stopped in 2014. Now, Nature has a publication where they had the entire genome of SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, completely mapped. You can compare it to the viruses that the Wuhan lab was looking at. And what they were doing was they were just trying to see what type of proteins were on the outside of those viruses, of the different coronaviruses. And so what the right wing and what a lot of propagandists are trying to say is that Dr. Fauci funded, and the NIH funded the research at the Wuhan lab. And that's what caused them to make this virus be more transmissible. No, it came from bats, because that's been studied. They can track it back to the bats, like in the freaking market. If you've ever seen the markets out there in China, they have species side by side. Okay. They have species side by side. And the more genetically related a species is to another, the more it can pass a virus to it, and it changes in that one. And then it can go to another one and it changes in that one. Then it can come back around. It can change in that one. And they butcher these animals on site. So this is a hotbed for transmission of viruses that are zoonotic. They can leave animals and enter into humans. I mean, that's how we got HIV. People used to eat chimps in Africa, and we got the chimp variant of HIV because people were eating chimps. They used to butcher chimps. So if you have this, that's how it spreads. And we have had research and evidence support that it came from that. It's molecularly impossible for it to have come from the Wuhan lab when you look at the strains of viruses that they were studying. They weren't manipulating them into something worse. They were just studying what they were, what the outside proteins were, what their genome is. And it can't make that jump to SARS-CoV-2 from what they had. It can't. There's no link there, evolutionary wise. And it wasn't just NIH. They had evolutionary biologists look at this. They had virologists look at this. So 99% of the scientific community is going, nope, Wuhan wasn't messing around with the viruses, making them more transmissible. Didn't come from the lab, came from animals. And then you get the one dude that Rand Paul is saying, well, this person who works at the Forbes Institute and this says it could happen, but this isn't his bread and butter. He's a molecular biologist, which is a big, huge, broad umbrella term. Okay.
Yeah.
He doesn't know everything, just like Rand Paul, who dropped out of undergrad, didn't even get an undergrad degree once he got accepted into med school. And the guy, just so you know, Rand Paul, he got fired from the Washington Times for plagiarism. So he has a track record of not only lying, he didn't know anything. Stealing, lying, and he couldn't even be bothered to finish an undergrad degree. He can work on eyeballs. That's it. He doesn't know anything else. He doesn't even understand zoonotic diseases. And in that latest exchange, he calls people manimals. He actually used that term when he was speaking.
like the old TV show from the 80s. I mean,
yes.
When I was a kid, I was fascinated with a guy that could turn into a lion or a snake. Remember, he had to make his hand shaped like the appendage of the animal that he was going to change into. So they'd have like either the actor or a hand model put his hand out, and they would do the bubbly transformation thing, and he would turn into. It was funny when he turned into a bull one time. So he's like holding his hand like a hoof.
I mean,
it was just so cringy. If anyone has not had an opportunity to see
Manimals, yeah,
check it out.
I actually broke down that exchange between Fauci and Rand Paul yesterday on my show. The last 30 minutes of the show, 30, 45 minutes. I go through and I talk about what gain of function means, what zoonotic diseases are, and I talk a bit about Rand Paul's history. He wasn't even certified. He wasn't board certified. He created
his own, didn't he? In the state,
he created his own because he didn't like the rules of having to have professional development with the board certification.
That's a common thing amongst sort of even like lowercase L libertarians in the Republican Party and in the right wing ideologies. It's something that comes up here. Because I work as a civil servant, so every once in a while we get this kind of backlash that what they call continuing education requirements.
I mean, as a teacher, I had to have professional development opportunities as a high school teacher, and sometimes I'd have to pay for it out of my own pocket. Yeah. But if I wanted to continue my licensure, I had to see what the latest science was and research associated with science education. Yeah. Go figure. Gotta grow,
Yeah, and that was something that, and it's weird to see people like, especially in like medical professions and stuff, kind of push back against. Like, I don't understand. Like, did you think it was static? Like, if you're using leeches, then yeah, we need you to get some continuing education done.
Oh,
but yeah, they'll resent that or whatever. And some people will make the argument like that it's confusing, or they're required to do it on their own with their own money and stuff like that. And depending on the states that you look at, some do. Some states are more like, yeah, not only do we require continuing education stuff, but here's exactly what we want you to do. It's laid out by like their boards, and then they provide it in some way. You know, it's like, and I in a way, I kind of like that better, because if the state requires it, the state should probably take it upon themselves to provide it, rather than saying, we want you to get continuing education. We're not going to tell you what we're going to accept up front, but you need to run out into the private sector and find some classes, which is unfortunately what a lot of states do. Which just builds resentment, and then people like Rand Paul make those a case. Like, that was his big reason. Yeah, I remember that. Like, I don't want to have to do Con Ed. Like, you should probably have to do Con Ed.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna be working on people's eyeballs, I mean, you're dealing with a sense, and if they get blind because you didn't look at what the latest techniques were, I mean, whatever.
That's
He's
the state's. That's when you'd blame the state. Well, they should have told me that I needed to get recertified or something. Like, take his license, take his fake license from him.
Oh my gosh.
Well, no, this one actually. So it was on May 10th through the 13th. This was at pointer.org. It was a PolitiFact hosted thing. United Facts of America. It was a festival of fact checking. Fauci was there. Found the whole thing. So it was there was quite a few speakers. Fauci was a keynote there. Fox and CNN and stuff pivoted off it, but he was asked there by someone from PolitiFact. What was the question? So Katie Sanders asked him, there's a lot of cloudiness around the origins of COVID-19 still, so I wanted to ask, are you still confident that it developed naturally? And he said, no, actually, and keep in mind, this is beginning of May. No, actually. Okay. Let's see, I'm not convinced about that. I think we should continue to investigate what went on in China until we continue to find out to the best of our ability what happened. Certainly the people who investigate it say it likely was the emergence from an animal reservoir that then affected individuals. But it could have been something else, and we need to find that out. So, that's the reason why I said I'm perfectly in favor of any investigation that looks into the origin of the virus. She followed up, and then, oh, wait. This was a question from Rand Paul. Following that, I think, will you, in front of this group, categorically say that COVID-19 virus could not have occurred by serial passage in a laboratory? And he didn't rule out explicitly a possibility. I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on there. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So.
Yeah, I posted a link that goes into that, the factcheck.org. And they've updated it since. I think it first happened around May 21st, 2021. That's when it was posted. And then it was updated July 1st with the latest information. And so there are papers that are linked within this particular article, and it gets into detail of what gain of function is. It gets into the evidence associated with it developing, naturally through natural selection. It talks about the differences between the viruses. It also talks about the funding from the NIH, and it breaks it down into pretty accessible language. So it's not super sciencey or anything like that. And they do bring up the May 11th Senate hearing. And then the subsequent interviews like on Fox and Friends. And then it also talks about at a fact-checking conference hosted by PolitiFact, it almost would be irresponsible to not collaborate with Chinese scientists given the 2003 SARS outbreak originated in China. So we really had to learn a lot more about the viruses that were there, about whether or not people were getting infected with bad viruses. So they continued that research until Trump shut it down in April of 2020 because they wanted to learn about the coronaviruses, but they weren't manipulating them to make them more dangerous, which is what the narrative that the GOP is pushing right now.
Yeah, and I think that, and what I find weird about that is, like, it seems to me that if they're going to push that as a narrative, it's kind of a mainstream conspiracy theory for themselves and for their base. let's say that they're convinced that that's right, and then they gain some kind of power. Doesn't it follow from that they need to punish, or there needs to be some kind of retribution against China for what they did? I mean, like
that might be what they're looking at, but right now I think they're trying to hang people in our own country, saying that this is your fault, you caused that. Right now they're going through the finger pointing stage of our own country rather than getting involved with any international dispute.
yeah, that just seems so dangerous, because in an effort to tar our own, they're actually looking at like, okay, well, it follows then that at what point is your base, which is not known for being level-headed, reasonable, rational, a lot of their base, like, when are they going to be like, well, wait a minute, remember you promised you were gonna arrest Hillary Clinton? Well, it kind of follows from what you've been doing with Fauci, that you need to arrest him and you need to attack China. Just like if they start really foaming at the mouth, mad about the whole thing, and it's like,
I mean,
watching them hit the gas on that
January 6th thing. Oh no, that was just a tour from tourists.
Yeah,
that just got really excited about being at the Capitol, even though they had zip ties and guns and
built a scaffolding with a noose. Yeah,
for Pence, the VP. That was just playful. They were joking.
Yeah, they killed a cop and they planted bombs, and it was all good fun.
Yeah, that was all in good fun. It's like a typical Friday night for a bunch of right wingers to go around and threaten to hang people and kill cops. Even though Blue Lives Matter, guys, except those.
Except when they're keeping you from killing the vice president. Well, we need to lynch him, so beat this cop to death with a Gadsden flag, and then go in there and smear your feces on the walls.
Yes.
And steal anything you can from Pelosi.
Yeah. Steal or mail, because that's not a federal offense.
Yeah, that's not a felony at all. Yeah.
So it's just, and then you look at Fox News right now, they're like, you guys really need to take this virus seriously. Well, all of your viewers are dying. So I kind of understand why you're taking that stance now.
Yeah, and it's scary now, because somebody was reading this to me yesterday. It was like, this time last year, I think there were on this day last year, it was something like 71,000 new COVID-19 cases were reported, and yesterday it was like 81,000.
Yeah, and actually yesterday I was talking about how it's probably going to reach 80 some odd thousand within the next day or so. I figured it might hit 70. Didn't think, but probably tomorrow we'll probably be looking at 100,000 if it's at that rate. It jumped from 67 to 80, probably hit close to 100K by the end of the day today.
And it's weird, because it's hitting that rate in these isolated. State that I'm in, and regions like this, like, over in Pennsylvania, Ohio, like, if you look at those on like the New York Times COVID's tracking, there's a lot of like minimal to no risk counties now being reported, like the vast majority of them. But you see these bright red or purple spots where Missouri and Arkansas used to be, and it's just like, holy shit, are they getting that rate in those? Because I remember thinking back early last summer, I remember thinking like, no, I think that this is going to get really bad in Arkansas and Missouri, because I think they're very red. There's a lot of this anti-COVID, anti-masking, science rhetoric in these states. I think that's going to be the next hotspot. I think my prediction was right. I was just 12 months early, because it seems like it didn't get that bad. And the other states instead went through their, states like Michigan, Illinois, New York, and California went through like 2 or 3 different moments where they just would hit like a fever peak.
Yeah.
And then it kind of dropped down. And LA's got those increases going on now in California. And I guess the Bay Area is seeing an uptick too. But it just seems like we're getting these kinds of rates that were like national numbers, but it's more concentrated in these, geographic areas. It's scary.
And it's largely to do with, the Trump rhetoric. Those are Trump states. The states that were heavily Trump winning in the last election are the ones that have the increase in this rate. My state, where I am in, is a Trump state. And it's interesting. I'll tell you this little anecdotal story. So I joined a Facebook group for my town, for like my county where I live. I used to teach, like I said, I taught biology. I taught bio 1 and 2 out in this county. And then in the next county over, I taught chemistry as well as physical science. Well, in this county, when the pandemic started to happen, I went through and I started to join Facebook groups because I'm like, I want to be a resource for people because I imagine they're scared. Since I live out here, maybe they recognize me because I used to teach their kids like biology and stuff like that. And so I offered a Q&A session to say, hey, if you have any questions, just hit me up. And they would ask me about, it started out very amicable. And then the thing about the masks came up. And then I started talking about the importance of masks and what they do. And then I offered to give away, because I had bought on Amazon, like there was this bag of 50 cloth masks for like $20. And I'm like, I'm just going to buy that. And so I bought it, and I had offered to, give some masks out to people if they needed a cloth mask or anything like that. I was just going to give them one. It turned dark really, really fast. They started to comb my Facebook page. They started to threaten me, saying that I wasn't a real person. I was probably some kind of Russian operative.
Oh, that's interesting.
My mom lives across the street from me, and she was starting to get scared. And and I had a joke on like my cover. It was like a picture of Wonder Woman, and it said Antifa, because I was trying to be funny. And I did that. I had one with the X-Files, had one with the Avengers, and so they were like, she's pushing an Antifa agenda. She's Antifa. We need to find out where she lives, if she's real or not. And I'm like,
what the hell?
These are people, I live in their town, and they thought that I wasn't real. And I taught their kids biology, and they immediately were like, well, she's pushing the Antifa agenda, and she's, those masks, they're just trying to get us to, and it just went into conspiracy tinfoil hat wearing crazy, to where my mom was texting me going, you need to block all these people and leave the group. You need to block all these people and leave the group, because she was getting scared. She was actually getting afraid for my safety in my own town where I live. Okay.
And for the most part, all you've done is like, hey, if anybody wants a mask, let me know.
Yeah. Oh my God. And that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a resource to help them understand the virus. And it turned into, we got to find her. We got to figure, and I'm like, burn the witch, man. I'm going to get like, and to be fair, just so you get a bit of perspective, early 2000s is when my town removed the KKK as a local organization from their website.
From the website?
From the website.
Oh, good Lord.
That was a local organization, part of their local organization.
Were they like linked up with like the JCs and the Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah,
oh my God.
Here's our local division of the KKK. You too can come to this glorious town of ours. That's totally open to everyone, unless you're brown or black. And if you're smart, forget it. We'll find you and try to burn you as well.
It's like, welcome to our town. Howdy, y'all. If you're not white, you need to go back to where you came.
Oh my gosh. Or if you're smart or a scientist, then it's just like, she's pushing the Antifa agenda. She's probably one of them old crazy scientists out there, And I'm just like, my God. I'm a college professor, and they were like trying to figure out where I live because they thought I wasn't real.
Well, you had to climb one of those ivory towers, so that means that you got a Bilderberg ring or whatever it is. I don't know what they.
Yeah, I'm part of some secret Illuminati society or something or whatever. Like I have time for that.
Not to drag you into unusual exchanges, but one of the people commenting in the live chat right now is Stephanie Trenton, and I can't understand the comments that she's making.
Okay.
They come at you in a way to win one way or another, good or bad. Innocents cannot know the difference until after that. Stephanie. And she said something about good cop, bad cop play. And I'm like, I don't know if she's referring to you and me, Mel, or if she's talking about something else. But
maybe. I think maybe she's probably talking about how it is that people fall for propaganda, you know, and
I think
so.
Yeah, but I think one of those things that you run into the danger, if that's where she's going, like of saying
Yeah.
both sides do it, and because of the dissonance in concert, it's all
Yeah.
fake. Like, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, it's not all fake. It's one is going to be inaccurate, and the other one might be closer to the truth. I think, yeah.
They being the mind controllers. I think she's talking about mind. Well, there are people that are manipulative, particularly with the last administration. And I actually talked about that on my channel. How is it that people like that can get into power? The science of influence. And how it is, you know, with like people keep talking about Nuremberg and all that, and the German trials, the war criminals, the Milgram experiment. So I talk a bit about the Milgram experiment, Stanford
That is a
prison
fascinating experiment. Yeah.
And it still holds up. It still holds up. And there's a lot of overlap with like the Stanford prison experiment. People put on certain uniforms. They attain that particular personality. So
I had to highlight that one. That was a good one.
But you know, how is it that people like that can come into power? And they play a lot into your cognitive biases. They'll tell you what you want to hear. Confirmation bias. They'll show you evidence that appeals to your particular perspectives, and then they'll reward you for doing what they want you to do. And if you don't do what they do, then you know they punish you for that. But the rewards are so nice. You know, it's like kind of like how a narcissist can manipulate another person. They overcompensate, shower you with all of this stuff, you know, like make you feel super good. And then if you don't do what they want you to do, they withdraw that. And then you have become addicted to that showering of attention. And it's, you know, confirmation bias is a hell of a drug. Somebody's telling you everything you ever wanted to hear, and you've been afraid in the past because you don't like change and all of these other things, and you're afraid of Black people because you grew up during the time where you were told they were evil and awful and all these awful things. And so here comes this president that's super racist and says, I understand your fears. We need to bring back the white culture. And you're like, yeah, it's just, and then it just feeds that into those fears that you had before, and it gives you some kind of comfort. So we get like a horrible person like Trump in office, and then people just will do whatever he says because he's made them feel so very good about themselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then they die because, you know, it's not a real virus because this person that made me feel good wouldn't lie to me. He made me feel so good about myself. And it's just people don't understand we all have bias. Even I have been susceptible to a malignant narcissist who became a stalker of mine for over 3 years. Online stalker, generate fake accounts and would follow me around, try to get to know my friends, and had other people spying on me. It was crazy. And people are like, you're so smart. You're so clever, Mel. How could you fall for a narcissist? Because he watched me for a long time on the internet, and then he figured out where that weakness was. Oh, this is a weakness of hers. I can make her feel good. And then they go in, and then you become addicted a bit to them going, oh, you know what? That is something that, you know, they make me feel good in this one little place that I probably needed to work on myself a bit.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. That's what happens. It's just people are like, they're so clever. How could they fall for that? Well, they're good. They're really good at figuring out what your weakness is, and they manipulate that. And that's one of the things that Trump could do. He knew that his support would come from the willfully ignorant, the completely stupid, and they would believe everything that he would say as long as he made them feel good. And that's what's happening.
I think this is a good comment. Is people like my parents who are in their 60s tend to believe charismatic individuals more than they do research and science. Yeah, I think that's a trick. I don't know if like the youngest generation coming up now, like the Z or whatever they're called. I think somebody called them Zoomers or something like that. I'm like, I think they're going to have an issue with that a little bit here.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's so much the case. That there might be a little bit more balance in that. But I've noticed that even with like, my parents and their relatives and stuff like that, if you've got somebody that can seems to project some confidence, even when they're saying absolutely nothing substantive, they will be like, well, I like the cut of this guy's jib. I like the fact that I could have a beer with him. He seems no nonsense. And it's like, well, you might be getting the impression by the way he's presenting himself that he's no nonsense. But if you actually listen to what he's talking about, he doesn't seem to know much of anything. And that seemed to work on enough people with Trump. And then there was the fact that, unfortunately, when he was running against Hillary Clinton, that was the guy that could take it from her. And he did. Like, if it had been another one of the Republican candidates, she would have won. Like, if it was her versus Ted Cruz, she would have kicked. I mean, she got more popular votes than Trump anyway. But I mean, if it had been her versus Ted Cruz, she would have mopped the floor with him.
Or even Mitt Romney, Yeah,
Romney probably might be better liked than Clinton, but he's so much more boring than anyone else. So
he's very docile.
Yeah. And I don't think that would have worked either. But it was like a perfect storm that was her election to lose. And if she was going to lose it, she was going to lose it to Trump, and lose it she did. So it was just, and we got to spend 4 years in a constant kind of like
thinking we're in an insane asylum, like Arkham Asylum. Like the worst kind of asylum possible. I was in Arkham Asylum for 4 years. Yeah. It was the Joker. Telling me all of this stuff, gaslighting me all the time. I'm like, I can't deal with this.
The inmates were now running the asylum. And it was weird too, because you were constantly waiting to see like, well, is he going to do anything good or bad? Or like how bad is this going to get? Fortunately, as far as totalitarians go, he was so lazy. And incompetent that he wasn't really capable of doing anything. And the types of cronies that he pulled in there were about as shiftless and as just, kind of one-dimensionally, just they wanted just an immediate kind of gratification, an immediate payoff. And so I mean, we were kind of fortunate that 4 years of kind of transparent, cronyism and corruption just kind of fizzled out. But it just so happened that we get a pandemic. It was weird because a friend of mine showed me I'm not a big fan, but it was a conversation on Joe Rogan's podcast with him and Sam Harris. And Sam Harris was, Rogan had asked him something about, it was before the election. He's like, okay, Clinton versus Trump. And Harris lays it out. He's like, look, whatever you think about Clinton, the thing that you have to kind of pay attention to are the issues coming up in our immediate future are issues that involve a lot of science. And Trump is a kind of guy who has not only demonstrated that he doesn't know a lot about science, but he's actually hostile to science. Like he's demonstrably untrustworthy in this area. And he's like, we're overdue for a pandemic, is one of the things he mentions in that interview. And then sure enough, he's like, imagine us having to deal with a pandemic under a Trump administration. I'm like, well, now we don't have to imagine it. Thanks, Sam Harris. He's a little bit of a prophet in that. The whole thing was just gross because it was just like you just had to slap your forehead. The best thing about it for some people who were fortunate enough, like I didn't lose my job. I got to work from home. I got to isolate that way. I tend to be a hermit anyway, so working from home, I've gone totally Howard Hughes. I struggle to wear normal pants now.
Me too. I think I've gained 30 to 40 pounds in the past year and a half because normally, I'm like walking around. When I give lecture, I don't just sit at the front or anything. I walk around, I engage my students. I'm in the lab. I'm running around campus, and here I'm just like, okay, it's been an hour that we've been talking. Let's take a 15-minute break. And then I go walk to the kitchen and then I come back and sit down. Okay. You guys enjoy your break. I'm going to get sores on my butt from sitting here.
I find myself now after dealing with this for over a year, it's like now I'm at the point where it's like, okay, I haven't really gained. I was heavier from the stress of my job in the office and kind of having a bad diet. So when I ended up when I was working from home, it was like I found myself eating less, and I'd go out for walks and stuff. And it actually kind of balanced out. I didn't really see
That's
that.
good. I didn't do that at all.
At the peak of it, though, when it was getting really intense, my drinking really kicked up. So while I wasn't eating a lot, I was drinking more than I should have, and
Yeah.
that's a lot of useless calories right there. And alcohol makes me gain weight like a Japanese cow. Like, I mean,
you were really training to be a sumo wrestler. That's what you're saying.
Basically, yeah. And it was like,
Me
okay.
too.
It's like you just fill me with sake and vodka and whiskey, and then feed me big fattening bowls of soup. And that's what was happening around the winter times. It was like the second chin is bigger than the first one that's supposed to be there. Like,
oh, okay. See.
Yeah. It's just like,
I've started going to the gym. I did actually build a gym inside my kitchen, and then all it did was just intimidate the hell out of me. When I would walk in there, I'd be like, I really need to exercise. And I would do some exercise in there, but it got to where the strain of everything else, I didn't have energy. I wasn't walking around. I wasn't like, it's just the emotional drain. I took 4 months off of my channel. I just took 4 months off because I couldn't deal with the emotional overwhelm and the sadness of dealing with the pandemic. And, I teach 70% of our student population are poverty line. So, I would have to be there and be like a shoulder sometimes for my students. And I would hear about them losing their jobs and it's a diverse population. So I was seeing a lot of firsthand what was going on, even though I was working from the comfort of my home. I went above and beyond trying to be like super there for them. And that in turn had me burning candle at both ends. And by the end of the day, I was just exhausted all the time. And I wasn't super active. I was just doing my job and trying to go above and beyond, which in turn was self-destructive.
My thinking was like, I remember a guy that I grew up with as a kid. He was big into hunting and fishing and stuff, and he was like, no, we're going to be in this boat for about 6 hours fishing. And he's like, this is going to be a kind of tired that you've never experienced before. He's like, you're not up and walking around, you're not doing anything like that, you're just concentrating on this task while sitting on a stool in a boat. And I found that working from home kind of has that same kind of level of tired, where you're capable of doing more stuff, but your body is fatigued and stressed in this weird way that you don't really want to focus on anything anymore. You just start finding yourself becoming dysfunctional in really weird ways. I dropped money on an exercise bike, and I tried to do that like twice a day. I got breaks at work and stuff, so I tried to get on there and do that. But yeah, it's still been slow because it's just like, I was used to the beginning of the pandemic where you just kind of you're just sort of sitting there watching the news, waiting to get updates. And it's like every day the news was getting worse. And it was like, I don't feel like exercising. Like I didn't even feel like eating. I was just sitting around anxious. So
yeah, it's, and I've built a nice little gym with some free weights and stuff. I ended up getting a bike, and I thought I've got to get out of this house because it's affecting my mental health. So I got a 3-wheeled bike, and I would either walk or I would ride to the nearby park and sit at one of the park benches and plan my day. And then I would come back.
Not a bad idea.
And I thought it's just at least getting me out of the house. I didn't realize how much getting out of the house was important for my mental health. Just sitting outside doing work. And so I set up an outside office to where I could take my laptop, and I had like a little umbrella, and I had a little fan, and even have a little screen because the sun sets in my backyard. And so I would sit out there and take calls with students because I just had to be somewhere this is a cool room. Don't get me wrong. I got
it's pretty cool.
I got a space for my dog, but
I like the Kingdom of Heaven poster that you've got in the back. I like that movie.
It's cool. I got like Pirates of the Caribbean on that side. I got Red State over here. I got a signed Pirates. I've got like a Lord of the Rings script back here that's signed by the cast. So it's like, this is a cool room, but it got to where I felt like I was on all the time. You're like, hey guys, how are you doing? Is everybody okay? You staying safe in this pandemic? What's going on? Because I knew everybody was so used to just The pandemic's on. It's so awful. It's terrible. It's what, and so I would have to ramp it up to try to get people, number one, interested in what we were doing for class. And two, I wanted to be a happy face for them to see,
Yeah.
But then I would also be honest with them and let them know, yeah, I'm struggling too, but I recognize my, where I am at is quite different than yours. But, and then I'm like, okay, so guess what, guys? I found this really cool thing, look at this. Let's talk about this. How is this related to what we're talking about? Or like this week, I used the acid squirting lobster in chemistry class because it squirts 85% solution acetic acid. And so we're talking about solutions, talking about acid-based chemistry. Is it a weak or strong acid? Why? So would you really be bothered with this thing in your house?
Is it that particular lobster edible?
I don't know. It's a few inches long. It's called a vinegaroon.
Oh, vinegar. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Doesn't that sound like something from Willy Wonka or something?
Yeah, it sounds whimsical, but the fact that it sprays acid also seems not fun.
It eats scorpions and millipedes and cockroaches. It eats the yucky stuff that you don't want in your house. So if you have a vinegaroon in your house, you're all right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So having to stay on all the time. And I would be teaching all day. And then for a while, I just had make an appointment if you want office hours. So I didn't have any set times to where I felt like I couldn't check my email and I use Google Voice for texting for my students. So they can text me on Google Voice if there's something wrong. And I can just check it when I want to rather than have my phone go off all the time.
Yeah.
So I tried to put those boundaries in place. I was still I was on all the time and I would be working what felt like 70-hour weeks.
Yeah.
That
happened to my sister-in-law is in the educational system out west, and her stuff, she's not a teacher, so she didn't have to deal with like kind of the classroom stuff, but she's a school psychologist. So as far as like she's supposed to be doing testing and evaluations and interviews and consultations and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, depending on how things were going where she was at, it was all online. And I think she probably was averaging. There were times there just working from home. She's supposed to be going back in another month, I think. But she was probably averaging 70, 75-hour work weeks.
It's easy to do. And then you think, well, I can just go take a nap here and there, which is true. But you're just on all the time. And I tend to be a super high energy person anyway. And I really like my job. But when you have to go above and beyond, and I was like, well, I'm working from home. I have students who are in like frontline medical workers and stuff like that. I want to be a place where they can feel comfortable, where they can enjoy class. And so it was just like, that takes all your energy. And so I couldn't exercise. And then just being in here all the time, I'm like, I just want somebody put me in like a medically induced coma for 3 months. And then I'll be fine.
Yeah. You finally catch up on your sleep.
That'd be all right. And then maybe people will have, however this virus plays out, 3-4 months. I wake up, I'm like, okay, I've lost some weight because they had to feed me through a tube. Sure, I lost muscle mass, but I can walk again. I'll get it back. Doesn't sound too bad to me.
Just check it. Yeah, when you check out, then find out that if you thought because what is it? There's a Lambda variant. I think somebody had mentioned that in there, but I don't know if that's the thing about these variants, because it's like it's not like they're not steadily getting worse. It's like you'll hit one and that's like, okay, well, Delta's kind of an ass kicker, but what's after that? Epsilon? The Epsilon variant might be completely like it causes it makes your fingernails grow. That's it.
Well, I will say, to belay any fears, because the way that COVID-19, and this is where you got to kind of look at it from the virus perspective. So we know natural selection is a thing. We know stuff evolves because we're getting these variants. But the way that the virus enters into your cells, it enters in through the ACE2 receptor, which is expressed on just about every cell in your body. If it were to change its mode of entry, and see, that's what the vaccine gums up with antibodies, right? It makes antibodies for that, to keep it from entering in through the ACE2 receptor. So it wouldn't be beneficial for the virus to change how it enters into the cells, since it can enter into so many types, right?
Yeah.
So the variants that we're seeing, the Delta variant, it's more transmissible. Yeah, if you get the vaccine, you could possibly get sick, but you're not going to go to the hospital and it's not going to kill you. I mean, the likelihood that it's going to do that, your luck is just terrible. If that happens to you, you're in like the fringe, like the super fringe. But if you get that, and then these other variants, the likelihood that they're going to change that mode of entry, statistically, pretty low, because it's working pretty great for it right now, right? We got
that's the one thing it would not. Yeah, that's an advantage. It's probably not going to lose.
Right,
Yeah.
it's not going to lose that, and that's exactly what the vaccine protects you from, is that particular mode of entry. So these other variants, I'm really not too worried about it, because you might still catch it and get a little sick, but you're not going to die from it. You're not going to go to the hospital. You might feel a little yucky for a couple days, but it's not likely to change that mode of entry. It could. I'm not saying that it can't do that. But since it's working so well for the virus, I mean, that's like a thief. It's like, let's go back to Arkham Asylum. It's like the Joker got the literal key to the city. Okay. And some of the houses have developed a security system to gum up his key to where you can't actually get in the house. He's like, all right, I won't go to this house. I'll go to another one.
Yeah. I still have still got 50% left about.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
not to get too technical, but what have they estimated an R naught factor for the Delta variant?
I don't think so. I don't.
Okay.
I don't know. We can look it up. I mean, the more people get sick, the more we'll learn about it. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's the upside, but the downside is, we wouldn't have this if people would have just stayed home, if they would have gotten vaccinated. This at best could be like a recurring cold if everybody just got the freaking vaccine.
Yeah.
That's it.
And now correct me if I'm wrong too, but if you got more people who are vaccinated from it, even if they're coming in contact with it, viruses have a reduced chance of successful mutation if they're running into people who are inoculated.
Yes, that's true. I mean, because you think about it, what's the purpose of antibodies? It gunks up the receptors on the outside of the virus so it can't enter into a cell and hijack it. Yeah. It can't do that. So if it can't enter into your cells, the likelihood that it'll mutate is really, really low.
Yeah. So get your vaccines, everybody, if you're not vaccinated. If you don't have, if there's some reason why you can't, then, my condolences, but if you can, and you're definitely get it. Yeah, I guess we can probably wrap it up there. Is there any last point you want to make, Mel, before we've been
get vaccinated. Wash your hands. I might start wearing,
Don't listen to Sager and Jetty. Washing your hands is still important.
Dr. Fauci is better than Rand Paul. Rand Paul is an idiot, and he doesn't understand zoonotic diseases and uses the term manimals. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah. Also, if you can, check out Manimal. I believe it was an NBC show.
Yes, cartoon's really cool.
No, it's not. It wasn't a cartoon. That was what made it worse. It's a live action drama.
Okay, you're right.
I think it was a Glenn
I was thinking
Larson.
of Beast Wars. Sorry.
Oh no, Beast Wars I think is higher class than Manimal.
Yeah.
Manimal was one of these. I think it was Glenn Larson, maybe Donald Belisario. Back in the days, the guys that brought us like Battlestar Galactica and other great gems.
Yes.
Manimal was like, because there was an Automan show about the guy that turned into it was a car that became a man. And in Manimal, it's a guy that can turn it because of magical curses or something like that. He can turn into whatever animal he wants. He just has to. Oh God, it's so good in such a bad way. So anyway. That's my tangent.
Rand Paul is Manimal, or at least he wants to be.
He wants to be. Yeah, that was definitely like Fauci should have like really dunked on him hard for that one. Like, are you talking about the show from like '83?
It's like, excuse me, Congressman Paul, you mentioned Manimal. Are you discussing the 1980s TV show? I'm really confused.
If you think that people can just transform into, say, a python and avoid COVID, or are you suggesting that people transform into bats because this strain has jumped from bats to humans? We just jump into bats and then we can dodge the whole thing for a year and a half.
Well,
right?
Yeah. If you're curious on my take on that, you can check out my latest episode on my channel. It starts about an hour and 13 minutes in. I rip Rand Paul a new one.
Yeah, do that. And look forward to Scientist Mel's new video, Why Jefferson Spatchcock is Wrong About Manimal, the worst show ever done.
My response video to the show I was on.
Yeah. This guy's an idiot. Manimal is terrible. Get vaccinated. All right, folks. Thank you, Mel, for coming on and talking about this. This is useful information. Yeah, this was really fun. Thank you, everybody, for showing up and commenting. I'm going to post the link if anybody wants to stay on and talk with me off air. Let me get that in there now.
I can chat for a little bit off air. I don't have a lot going on, so it's cool.
Yeah, I don't have much either. I'll just take this off air. I'm going to make it I need a second cup of tea. But other than that, I'll post it there if anybody wants to come in. Most people, I don't think, want to jump in live and ask questions or anything like that. So, but if you do want to come in and hang out and chat with us for a little bit, probably keep this going. But yeah, Mel signed us off with the best information. Get yourself vaccinated. Rand Paul's an idiot. I mean, we could discuss Manimal later, but we won't.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could. Anyway, take it easy. Everybody enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We are out.